There is no more time to waste. No more time to waste at all because we got Big Ten football back. You want to talk about no more time to waste? The Big Ten has no more time to waste because they've been sitting on the sidelines for 5 weeks here waiting for their season to get going. And after what seemed like basically 2.5, 3 weeks of will they return, won't they return, what will it look like, when will it look like, we finally got some answers Wednesday morning. I'm sure many of you, a lot like me, I live on the West Coast, so I was waking up right as that news was breaking, but early Wednesday morning, about 8:30 or so Eastern time, 5:30 or so Pacific, the Big Ten officially announces that it's coming back. And of course, if you've been listening to this show, frankly, if you've been following sports anywhere on any level, it appeared this was something that it felt like for the past 4 or 5 days that was coming. We have had so many twists and turns in this Big Ten story, but really about last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it really started to feel like, okay, we might actually get Big Ten football back here now. I was told that some of the teams that have their teams on campus were actually telling their guys, gear up. We're going. Sometime in October, we are going late October. And as I've said on the last couple shows, I do think there was some back and forth over when they should start, how they should start, what it should look like. But on Wednesday morning, we finally get a decision. Big Ten football is back. And so very quickly, let's just get into what you need to know about Big Ten football. Obviously, it goes without saying the ACC and Big 12 kicked off last week. The SEC kicks off next week. But Big Ten football is back. So first of all, when do they start? They are going to start playing games October 26th. Do I wish it was a few weeks earlier? I absolutely wish it was a few weeks earlier. Do I think the Big Ten schools and players and coaches wish it was a few weeks earlier? I know for a fact they wish it was a few weeks earlier. As I've said on many episodes of this podcast, Jim Harbaugh said, we can be ready in 2 weeks. Ryan Day said last week, we want to be playing in mid-October. And so most of these schools have their players on campus, but essentially the reason that it has been pushed back to October 23rd is very simply this. We know that, I think if you follow this situation on any level, at any sport, even outside of the sports world, the big news over the last 2-3 weeks is that we are in the process of getting some form of rapid testing, okay? So essentially, you will be able to go somewhere, get a test, and in 15 minutes get a result. And obviously, as it pertains to athletics and college athletics as a whole, that is very, very, very important, right? It is very important because when the Ohio State football team has a 2:30 practice, they can show up at the facility or say they have a 4 o'clock practice. They show up at the facility at 2:30. They get a little swab. The swab goes in a little tube. And by 2:45, they know if they're positive or not. And if they're positive, they don't come into the facility. They go quarantine. They do what they got to do. And if they're negative, they, of course, come into the facility and are able to practice, play, all of that stuff. And what you're essentially doing is more or less, it's not a perfect situation, but you're essentially creating a bubble in college athletics. We know very quickly who has it and who doesn't. And if you have it, you're not allowed to be around anybody else. They can, of course, what's the term there? Isolate people that have been in contact with you, contact tracing. So if Aaron Torres, the starting linebacker at Ohio State, shows up at the facility and tests positive, they can immediately track down everybody that was within a small frame of him, 6 feet of him. And they can test them or isolate them and make sure that they're safe. And so I bring all this up because that is why we're going to October 23rd. Essentially, the Big Ten wants to get out all the kinks and quirks that come with this rapid testing so that once they ramp up, they don't have to ramp back down. And I will say in defense of the Big Ten, we have had a lot of cancellations across college football in the Big 12, a couple games in the ACC. BYU Army was canceled this week. And so essentially what the Big Ten is saying is once we get going, we don't want to start. And I will say this for the Big Ten, they essentially have no wiggle room to not start on time and not finish on time because by starting October 23rd, they will play an 8-game regular season schedule. And then, a 9-game schedule. And then, of course, the conference championship game will be on December 19th, okay? So December 19th is the last day of conference play. The first game is October 23rd, but it's as I've told you for weeks now. Because of the way the SEC, to go back to the SEC, because of the way the SEC set up their schedule, they pushed back the conference championship game 2 weeks. It gave the Big Ten more wiggle room, and there was no reason that they should not have been playing in October. Again, they probably should have gotten on the field a little bit earlier, a week or two earlier, but the bottom line is they want to use and sample and figure out this rapid testing, so they'll be ready to go. 9 games starting October 23rd. Conference championship game December 19th, the same day as the SEC. The ACC and the Big 12 will be right around that same time. But essentially, people, what you need to know is this is what we were all hoping for, okay? What we were hoping for, as I've talked about in the last 2, 3, 4 episodes, and I'm telling you, I had some people behind those 4 walls that know what was going on, and there were 2 different variables at play. They could start in early to late October and be on schedule with everybody else. They could push back to Thanksgiving. We got what we wanted, which is an October schedule, which ends the same time as everybody else, and means that if the Big Ten has a team that is good enough, they will be in position to potentially play for the college football playoff. And I already know there's some people talking about, well, what if they only play 8 games? What if a game gets canceled? Should Ohio State only get in if they've only played 7 games? Listen, what I will say is that this is a year unlike any in the history of college football, or at the very least for the college football historians, since World War II, okay? If you go back to World War II, you can see that there were teams in that time frame in the early 1940s. Some teams played 3, 4, 5 games. Some teams played 7, 8, 9 games. And so that is essentially where we are at with Big Ten football right now. Yes, they're only playing 8 games plus a 9th conference championship game, while you have some schools, the SEC will play 10 plus the conference championship. The Big 12 and the ACC could potentially play 11 regular season games. The point being, this is a different deal, and so I already saw some people, well, if Ohio State only plays this many games, they shouldn't qualify. Well, if they're good enough, they're going to get in. If they're 9-0 at the end of this truncated season, they are going to get in. And so that is what you need to know. October 23rd is when the Big Ten is going to start, 9 conference games, and we'll get going from there. I think the next logical question that I know many of you are thinking or asking or wondering is, well, what took so long? And what changed over the last couple weeks? And so this is an important point, and I don't want to gloss it over because I don't want to let the Big Ten school presidents off the hook, but I do think it is an important part of this conversation, which is very simply what changed over the past 5 weeks since we canceled college football. Now, if you read the press releases and you followed the loser media that's been a mouthpiece for the Big Ten for the last 4 or 5 weeks, what they'll tell you is that, we have this rapid testing now. The way that we test is different. The way that this happens is different. And that really the theme that came out of Wednesday was, well, the Big Ten presidents, they really trust the medical advisors. Well, that's a bunch of crap, okay? And I'll tell you why it's a bunch of crap. It's a bunch of crap because, very simply put this, the Big Ten presidents never cared about what the medical advisor said. And you know how I know they did not care about what the medical advisor said? It's because if you go back 3, 4, 5 episodes ago, I talked about a report out of Nebraska in that the call that ended up canceling the Big Ten season, if you remember this, there wasn't a single medical expert on the call. If you go back to that episode, I talk about it at length, but the call that canceled the Big Ten season involved the 14 school presidents and the commissioner, Kevin Warren. It did not involve a single medical expert. It did not involve a single coach, a single parent, a single player, a single AD. And so don't give me this crap about, now that we're comfortable with the medical people said, that's crap. That's a bunch of baloney, and the Big Ten knows it. Here is why the Big Ten came back today. The Big Ten came back on Wednesday. The Big Ten came back on September 16th. It will go down as a day in infamy. The Big Ten came back because they knew they screwed up, and they knew there was no way to fix it other than to bring back football. They can talk about, it's rapid testing and this and that and our medical. It's they screwed up, and they realized there was no way to fix it. And I think really As crazy as it sounds, what you really have to do, you do have to go back to the beginning of this in early August. And what you have to do is put yourself in the mind frame of how those pompous, idiot school presidents, those nerdy guys and girls in tweed jackets with little leather patches on their elbows, when they went about this, we've talked about it, but it is important to remember. Those nerdy school presidents basically came to that podium that day. They did not listen to the medical experts because the medical experts were not on the call. So don't tell me it's about the medical experts figuring things out and they have a new presentation. But no, it's that they did not listen to medical experts. They did not listen to coaches. They did not listen to ADs. And what they very simply said was this: we are canceling football because we want to be the first ones. We want to show the world how serious we take our protecting our student athletes. And we're going to show the world that we care more than anybody else. And as I've said on this show before, we're going to show those heathens in the South that there's more to life than football. There's more to life than athletics. And they thought they were going to peer pressure the other three conferences into following suit. And that did not happen. And it has been talked about at length, but that is exactly what happened. I saw a great headline about 3, 4, 5 days ago where it said the Big Ten thinks it's the Ivy League, but wants to approach athletics as if it's the SEC. And you cannot have it both ways. And so when you look at the situation in the Big Ten, it very simply comes down to it was a conference that thought they could bully everybody else, and they simply couldn't. And I give so much credit to the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC for holding their ground, because it would have been easy to fold up the tents. It would have been easy to say we can't do this. Instead, they did what everybody should have done, which is take a deep breath, consider everything, be patient, actually listen to your medical experts, and then from there, they made the decision that was best for their conference. And so that is what has changed. What has changed is not the Big Ten's perspective. It's not some amazing medical miracle. What changed is that they realized that there was no way to get out of this. And so as I look back on this Big Ten, and we can finally wrap on this topic, we can finally start just focusing on games, focusing on the teams that will actually be on the field. This whole narrative changed not because of the medical experts, but because of the Big Ten community. And it is so much credit to all of the people in Big Ten country that they did not listen to their presidents. They did not accept yes for an answer. And they absolutely refused to take what the presidents were saying at face value. And so when I think back and I think about right now, September 17th, why are we playing Big Ten football? It's very simple. It goes back to the parents, the players, the coaches that refuse to take no for an answer, okay? The credit, when we start talking about credit for how did we get Big Ten football back, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you where it starts. It starts with the players. The players. It all started the night, even before the season was canceled, that Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, who ironically is still playing at Clemson, those guys came out and said, we want to play, okay? This all started before the Big Ten even canceled the season. It started with those two guys, because I was thinking about this on Wednesday when the announcement became official, and really essentially what you need to know is that the whole narrative about COVID in college football changed with two tweets, one from Trevor Lawrence and one from Justin Fields. And if you think back to that night, if you think back to that moment in time, you realize that all of the media coverage, all of the articles that you were reading was, the kids don't feel safe. They don't want to play. They don't think it's safe. They don't think their coaches are protecting them. Every single day it was a different article. And every single day, you had people in the national media, you had people in the local media saying, well, we can't. I mean, if the guys don't want to play and they don't feel safe, like we can't play. And so the credit starts with Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, because the second that they sent out those two tweets, the whole narrative changed. Every piece of media garbage that you guys heard up until that point was proven moot. And I know I've talked about it a lot, but I told you in July and I told you in early August when I was talking to parents of players and when I was talking to players this offseason, they were telling me, dude, Torres, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if we're going to pull this off, but I trust my coaching staff. I trust my medical staff. They are taking good care of my son. And so when Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields tweeted that out, all those stupid BS media narratives went out the window. You couldn't say that the players didn't feel safe. You couldn't say that the players didn't want to play. You couldn't say that it wasn't feasible to play college football because Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields, who were on the front line of this thing, came out and said, no. We're in this building. We know what our staff is doing for us. We know what our coaches are doing for us. We know what our medical people are doing for us. We want to play. So when we talk about why Big Ten football is returning, first we got to give credit to the players. Let's also give credit to the parents. I know that at times it has seemed, some of you have said the parents are too involved. They're talking too much. Let their sons do what they need to do and you stay out of it. No. The parents saw the injustice served and the parents spoke up. And I give so much credit to guys like Randy Wade, the father of Shaun Wade, the Ohio State defensive back. Randy Wade was a guest on this show. I give credit to the McCaffrey family. They had a son who was at Michigan, ironically announced he's going to transfer. But they had a son at Michigan, they had a son at Nebraska, and the parents came out and said, we want our sons to have the chance to play. We have faith in the coaching staffs and in the medical staffs. We as parents are signing off on letting our kids play. You know who else I give credit to? The coaches, who, as I've said many times on this show, they are speaking out directly, or they were at the time, against their own bosses. I mean, think about it. When Jim Harbaugh back in August tweeted out the actual COVID testing results from Michigan, what he was saying is, don't listen to my boss, the school president. Listen to me. I have the tests right here. I got the receipts, and I'm telling you it is safe for Michigan football to play. Same with Penn State. Same with Nebraska. Same with Ohio State. And I give those same coaches credit over the last couple weeks as it became clearer and clearer that it was the wrong decision, as it became clearer and clearer that a mistake had been made and that other schools were successfully pulling it off, and that Central Arkansas and Austin Peay could play, but Ohio State and Michigan couldn't. Those coaches spoke up. I give so much credit to Jim Harbaugh a week or so ago, 2 weeks now, saying, we'll be ready in 2 weeks. Don't use us as a pawn in your media game. You tell us when and where, we will be ready to play. Same with Ryan Day. Last week, don't use me as a pawn. We need to be back on the field October 17th. It is safe. We can do this. Our players trust us. We trust the players to be responsible. Let us play. So I give credit to the players, Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence, to the parents, Randy Wade and all those guys and girls, and to the coaches. Most importantly, you know who I give credit to? Is the lawyers. And I've talked about this a lot, so I won't get too much more into it. But the minute this narrative changed, if you remember, you can go back to early September. I mean, I'm talking 2 weeks ago. Kevin Warren said, we are not playing. This is final. Well, what changed? The lawyers got involved. And we all know when lawyers get involved, it's not going to end pretty for anybody. And it is, of course, ironic that the whole reason the Big Ten canceled their season was to avoid lawsuits. And the lawsuits only came when they actually did, in fact, cancel their season. So as I look back on the Big Ten, I really just want to give, I think we're here. I guess the best way to put it, we are here because of two separate entities of people. First of all, let's give credit to the players, to the parents, to the coaches, to the lawyers, to everybody for fighting, for saying no, for saying this is unacceptable. We are not going to tolerate this. This is not correct. You're doing our guys wrong. It's silly. It's ridiculous. No. So that's one. Credit to that group. And then secondly, as I said a minute ago, credit to the ACC, to the Big 12, to the AAC, to the Sun Belt, to Conference USA, and to the SEC. Because it would have been easy to look at what the Big Ten did. It would have been easy to say, you know what? If we mess this up, we'll never hear the end of it, and we could potentially be out of business altogether. But what Greg Sankey did, he drew a line in the sand. Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, and he said, every piece of medical information tells us that it is safe to play college football. We need to play, we should play, and we are going to proceed as if we're going to play. And if we get new information that says otherwise, then we're going to pull our kids off the field because we're never going to put them at risk. But it would have been so easy for them to say, you know what, Big Ten's out, Pac-12's out, we're just going to back out too. And instead, the exact opposite happened. The SEC drew the line in the sand, the Big 12 and the ACC stood behind them, and then, of course, the three other conferences stood behind them, to the point that, by the way, certain media members, I don't want to name names, but it rhymes with Pat 40. Oh, wait, it doesn't rhyme with Pat 40. It is Pat 40. Called them the Stubborn Six. The Stubborn Six conferences. Well, as it turns out, Pat 40, you were the stubborn one. You were 100% wrong on this. Anyway, I'm just getting off tangent here, but I'm just so fired up we got Big Ten football back. So credit to the players, parents, coaches, credit to the SEC, ACC, and Big 12 for saying we're not going to be bullied by you, Big Ten. We're going to trust our medical doctors. We're actually going to talk to them, and we will see where this goes. They have pulled off football. They have pulled off football over the last couple weeks. We're going to get SEC football next week, and it is credit to them that the Big Ten is back today. And as I said, I'm just fired up, and I'm especially fired up, and I will, for once, give the Big Ten credit. They got this right. We're playing in October, and Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, whoever you believe is a national championship contender, they will get a chance to prove it on the field. This will not be something that we look back 30 years from now and say, man, remember that team, that Ohio State team with Justin Fields that never got a chance to compete for a championship? That was screwed up, man. We don't have to say that anymore. If Ohio State's good enough to win it all, we will find out. The good news, by the way, is that two players from Ohio State that opted out this season appear to have opted back in. And so it feels good. It's just a positive moment. And by the way, I'll give a shout out to a listener of this show, JT, who DM'd me privately and said, the Big Ten coming back is not only a good moment for college football, it's a good moment for our society. And I agree 100% with that sentiment. I think that sports, through some of America's most toughest, challenging times, has been something that has rallied people. My uncle referenced Teddy Roosevelt talking about the need for baseball during World War II and the need for sport during all the way back in World War II. Of course, more recently, we just celebrated the anniversary of 9/11, September 11th, 2001. We all remember that moment in time when George Bush took the mound at Yankee Stadium and threw that perfect pitch right down the middle. And I do think that in this crazy time that we live in, it's not a perfect moment in time. So many people are struggling. We need sports. We've gotten them almost all back. Now we just got to wait for the Pac-12. And so let's get into the Pac-12 really quick, but I do want to give credit to the Big Ten. It took a while. They should have never canceled in the first place, but they did finally get this right.